Okay, should we start off? Perfect. So thank you, everybody, and welcome to this session. Thank you for joining us to find out why real action, or why real change starts with action. My name is Seán Mallon, and I am the WWF's Global Initiative Lead for the Climate Business Network. The CBN is a collection of corporate partners from across WWF's global portfolio of partners. We work with companies across every sector with huge supply chains, really trying to make the world fit the direction we need to see. We push our partners to have the highest ambitions, but then we work with our partners to make sure they can also reach those ambitions and get what they need. So we have quite a few members now, 30 members across the world, and we're very proud of it growing and as its impact. We work with our members through knowledge sharing, through training, supply chain engagement, and indirectly through policy engagement, like the 2 weeks of this COP, and that's what we're here to do. It's going to be a really exciting time for us. We're going to see a lot of amazing announcements, and we're going to talk to this wonderful panel beside me. But before we do that, I just want to show a graph on the screen. So we have, I know it's maybe not the best to show a business audience some scientific graphs, but this helps set the scene and tells us what we're working towards. This is from the IPCC's 6th assessment report, and this is the red line that we're focusing on here now. This is what we're talking about at COP indirectly. Every conversation is looking at this. We're trying to get this red line, which stands for the emissions that we have, and we're trying to move it to the safe blue zone. We're talking about reductions to get it down. We're talking about adaptation if we don't get it down, and we're talking about loss and damage if the terrible things befall us if we don't adapt. This is everything in my mind. This is the way we're here. It's very hard to empathize or to picture a red line. It doesn't mean a lot to people. So I just wanted to break it down. So beside it is a little chart showing where all these emissions come from. And if you can see, we have transportation, industry, electricity and heat production. We have buildings and we have agriculture. And not to hammer the point too much, but these are all businesses. This is where our emissions come from. So we can't have a net zero transaction without engaging meaningfully with businesses. In my mind, they are the most important stakeholder in this argument. All legislation is aimed at moving these companies. So if we can get them to move quicker, then that's even better for us, and that really helps us avoid the most perilous situations that we can imagine. And that's why we at WWF have brought out this, oh, my clicker's not working. There we go. We brought out the Beyond Net Zero report. This is, if I do say so, a very helpful and engaging report that we published with our partners at IKEA and H&M most notably to highlight what businesses can do right now. We took an end-to-end approach and said, this is very simple. We've taken all the guidance and simplified it down. It's less than 20 pages, and it shows people what they can do, the suggested metrics they can follow, and the best practices approaches that they can take. Our hope is to help speed up credible climate action and to hopefully help people leapfrog past the very expensive first phases of action. We know it can be very costly to start setting targets, to hire consultants to help you footprint your business. So hopefully this will help. We launched it back in 2021 at COP26. It was a very exciting moment for us, and here we are again back at COP28 to release it now in 4 new translations. So we have it in Spanish, we have it in French, Hindi, and Mandarin. For those in the business community, that's probably where your biggest footprint or your suppliers are based. So we're really trying to help unlock those markets and help speed up that action for companies. And that's what brings us to today's topic. So on this table here, you can see, this is how my mind works. We've laid everything out on a flat panel, and on the left-hand side, it's basically the start and the beginning. So we know what the problem is with climate change. We know it. Anthropogenic greenhouse gases are speeding up and rapidly increasing the changes that we're seeing in our climate. We know that is not up for debate anymore. That's done. We know the pathways we need to take next. We have our 1.5 degree pathways. We have the advice coming from groups like the UN and the SBTI. If you fast forward to the end, we know our intended outcomes. We know the goals we need to hit. We know 1.5. We know net zero by 2050. And even to help you get there, we know the actions that we have to take. We have an amazing report called Beyond Net Zero. It's got all the actions you need in it, but there's also guidance from every other sector. There's so much in this space. So we know the cause, we know where we need to be, and we know the things we need to do. The missing piece of the puzzle is in the middle, and it's action, and it's leadership. And while there's lots of businesses here, this is the biggest COP ever in terms of engagement. And we have 20 sponsors to the COP, and only one of those has net zero targets through the SBTI. So that's a problem. So there's lots of businesses here talking, but they're not doing. So I'm very excited to be beside some companies who are doing, and we're really excited to just highlight the good work you're doing, but also ask you how you got there and how you unlock that real change. So beside me we have Christina Niemelä, the Head of Sustainability at IKEA. We have Jamie Rusby, Group Sustainability Director at VELUX Group. And hopefully we'll be joined very soon by Helen Walter-Terrinoni, Director of Global Climate Policy at Trane Technologies. So thank you so much for joining me. Now, I'm going to jump right in and basically ask you, what are your targets? Why are you leaders in this space?
Should I go? So it's on already. Okay, so I'm starting. I think it's important to start from where it all started, 2012 actually, where we had our first sustainability strategy. Actually, Jamie was part of also working that out, so we were previously then colleagues actually. So they already then, climate was part of this. But I would say even before that, we have our vision, and that is to create a better everyday life for the many people. In that you can read everything about sustainability. So of course the climate, the nature, the people part is in that. But when we go back then to the climate part, so we have now just recently strengthened our goals according to the SBTI targets, of course, for net zero. So we are now going to be minus 50% by 2030. And that means reducing the emissions along our value chain. And we will go further to minus 90% latest by 2050. And the remaining reduction there, that is also in our value chain. And the remaining reduction of 10%, that's where we do removing and storing of carbon, both in land, meaning forests and also agricultural land, and in our products. But if we look at the piece regarding the drastically reducing that we need to do along the value chain, we do all those things without carbon offsets, because we believe we need to take the responsibility of our own work. So how we're going to do that? We're going to do that by transitioning into 100% renewable energy across the full users in the value chain, in the production, in the transportation, and in the last mile, for instance, fulfillment to customers. And we're going to also reduce the footprint by a very important part, and that is to reduce the range and products footprint. And how do we do that? That is much through the material, to use material with a lower emission than what they have today. Is also to actually inspire our customers to go more towards plant-based food. I don't know if you know, but we have almost 600 million people coming to an IKEA restaurant and having, maybe today they eat a meatball. We want them to eat the plant ball. That also takes down the emission a lot. And then also to increase the energy efficiency in people's homes, in the customers' homes, by using light sources and appliances with a lower energy use. And the last thing, but not the least thing, is to transform fully to a circular business. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Jamie.
Thank you. Well, congratulations for strengthening your targets further. I think IKEA has such a large reach in the supply chain, but also with customers. And I mean, you mentioned the food business, so I think it's a highly comprehensive approach. So congratulations for that. We in VELUX, if you don't know us, we make roof windows. So if you look around cities around the world, look up, and you start to notice us. But you know, we bring daylight and fresh air into buildings and into rooms. You can use natural ventilation in a fantastic way to cool buildings, for example. But we've set also you know, a comprehensive sustainability strategy with the climate part very much you know, in focus. Where we've also adopted science-based targets to a similar level as IKEA. We've said actually on the scope 1 and 2, so the operational emissions, that's mainly in our factories, our production. We'll say 100% reduction down to 2030. We know we will get not to true zero, but we will get pretty near to that. And that's energy efficiency, renewable energy, and we're well on the way with that. I think that's the part, you know, this is really getting your house in order, you have direct control. Let's just get that as close to zero as possible. Then we've also committed under the Science Based Target Initiative to halve our value chain emissions by 2030. So this one is a tricky one. We said actually we want to align with the 1.5 degree pathway in scope 1 and 2, but also scope 3. That's what the science demands, so that's what we want to do. The majority of the emissions actually sit in the materials in our products, so it's in the glass, aluminium, plastics. So we're working systematically with suppliers, trying to build those relationships, source low carbon materials, but also have visibility to 2030 on how to do that. And then when you've set a 50% reduction target in that time frame, you need to get all levers into play. So transport, indirect purchasing, even flying and employee transport. So I think it doesn't leave anything out at this point when you take such an aggressive target in such a short time frame.
Thank you. So that's two very ambitious sets of targets, the things we like to see. I'm going to give you a tough one to start out with. It's what are the biggest challenges you see in actually achieving these targets now? What are the barriers you're facing going forward? Do you want to start first, or yeah?
I'll continue that. So I think we talk a lot about challenges in the type of discussions, right? And of course, that's because we want to get to, okay, what's the solution to the challenge, right? So I think that's a good framing. I think there is a tendency to perhaps in companies focus too much on the challenges, which can be a little bit paralyzing in terms of taking action. So if you say, you look at your scope 3 footprint, so this is the bit outside your operations into your supply chain, you have no control over any of it. The data is very obscure, understanding what your footprint is. When we started out looking at our top 150 suppliers, you talk to the head of procurement, he says that most of them couldn't even spell CO2. And we've worked with them to enable them to calculate their footprint and set targets. So I think you're operating in a very unclear environment. So the challenges are real to being able to set action and move. But at the same time, I think we do focus a little bit too much on challenges, because the thing we need to do is actually just say, okay, I need to move there, but to get there, I need to take one step forward and then another step forward and another step forward. So I think that is, we could sit here all day probably and talk about the many challenges. I think we should, if I have a piece of advice, is to say actually acknowledge those challenges, but then take that first step forward. That's the most important one.
That we love to hear. Thank you so much. People are often fed up of hearing groups like WWF say things like that, so it's always really refreshing to hear it coming from the corporate side as well. But Christina.
Yeah, and of course it's so true what you say, Jamie. And in IKEA, our founder usually he said that most things remain to be done, glorious future. So somehow, I don't know if that's actually positive in a way, but it means that we need to keep on going. We need to do something. And in this time with these challenges, they are severe. I do think that we in IKEA, we have found some energy in talking about them in their interconnectedness. That we know we have the climate, the nature, and the inequality. That when we talk about them together and we try to actually focus on them to move all three at the same time. I think that has helped us. We are just starting that, I would say, because we have been a bit silofied before. But if we look at the challenges, actually, you can help one and then you are also tackling the others in one way. That I can feel actually is giving more inspiration. And since it is so huge, these challenges, of course the transformation is huge. It's a business model that we need to more or less change and to move to a fully circular. I mean, that's one easy sentence to say, but I would say maybe that captures everything, because that's where you will tackle, both how you produce your products, what materials that you use, and how you also meet your customers, what are the models you actually also sell. So what is then difficult or challenging? Well, you need to also invest. So you need to put, money into this. But I would rather call it an investment, not a cost, because you will get it back. So, we are working a lot to look into the material development and what you just shared also, Jamie, sitting there, for instance, with some metal. Metal needs to be recycled. We know today we can get to 85% on normal steel, 100% on aluminium. We need to move the 85 even further. We are not at 85 in every application, but in some. Plastics, etc. So we need to move with that. Work with the renewable materials as well, and invest in that, and then to do, for instance, forest management in continuously improved ways, even if we might think, yeah, we're good today, but we need to do even more, and also have higher efficiency output from all those parts. So we have to work on all these different things, and then also, of course, with the product development, to help customers to see that there's something that they can do about the situation at home as well. So we want to use our influence, our size, to actually influence to come to a positive impact.
Amazing, thank you. That's really impressive, the stuff you're saying. Obviously, you're talking about the investments, you're talking about these big things. They all require quite a lot of senior leadership buy-in as well. And a lot of companies we have been approached by are afraid of that part. They put together the research to show what they would like to do, but how do they unlock that? So I'm just curious from you guys to see how did you unlock that senior leadership buy-in, and what were the stumbling blocks along the way that people could maybe learn from? So I'll start here.
Yeah. Oh, is this Helen?
This is Helen, absolutely.
Maybe we should
everybody.
say hi.
Helen,
Hello.
welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining us. This is
Thousands of viewers. Sorry.
exactly. This is Helen Walter-Terrinoni, who is our Director of Global Climate Policy at Trane Technologies. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just talking about how to get senior leadership buy-in. So we'll give you a minute to get settled in, and we'll make our way down to you.
Yeah. And when I think of this question, one can think, what we do the last maybe 2 years or something. But I think we can have to go much further back, because realizing that when we set up the most senior, higher level sustainability forum in IKEA, that's a sustainability council, we have that led by the CEO in Indra IKEA. And in this council, that's kind of board in IKEA. We have different kind of names for our stuff here. We also then have CEOs from across the value chain. Including also from retail, from the IKEA, for instance, the biggest franchisee and other franchisees as well. So having them in, and that's actually where we also then approve our strategy and we follow up on the progress. So I believe also having them in since the start, we started this forum, we have been able also to upskill them, because everybody needs to be upskilled to understand. You said here before that people don't even know what CO2 is, yeah? So maybe they knew that. We shouldn't underestimate people here. But I think to work with upskilling has been very important for us. And then I think it's important that we, who then work with sustainability, I don't come from this area from before, but I have, of course, now done this for a few years. But we who work in sustainability, we need to talk in ways so people understand. I think actually should be a little bit critical to ourselves. We talk sometimes hush hush, people don't get it. So I need to talk in ways that business people understand, that they can take action, and that they can feel ownership. So that means I need to set specific goals that is possible for them to act on, because they want to act on it. I mean, everybody wants to work for a company that does the good thing. You don't want to work somewhere that feel that these are not contributing to the level they could. And we at IKEA, we've decided that we want to be a leader in this field.
That's amazing, and again, really refreshing. This is something that we talk about so often in the CBN. It's that communication. We often position ourselves as translators more than scientists. We're taking that information and translating it to a business audience. So I love that point. But Jamie, I'll pass it down to you.
Yeah, I think that point is critical, actually, where I think no one likes to feel stupid, right? And especially not CEOs and executive management and boards. They definitely don't like to feel stupid. And there is an enormous learning curve in this area to understand, okay, what does scope 1 and 2, scope 3 look like? Where does the impact sit? What are the choices we can make? If we go too early, what are the consequences? What are the advantages? They need to make some quite big decisions, actually. And if you put a decision in front of someone and they don't feel they have the competence or the knowledge to really be able to take an informed choice, then of course you get the reaction where you'll get the pushback against it. So I think the companies that have been successful, I see, are the ones who their executive teams have spent the time to understand, to really have a deep dive and understand. And that could be sitting down with the head of the greenhouse gas protocol and having a day's deep dive on that. Could be any number of those actions, but to really be able to understand enough to be able to take a decision, I think is very important. And then I think they don't like to feel stupid, but I think they do like to feel like leaders, mostly, right? They've got to where they've got to because they want to lead. So I think that is powerful. That can be powerful. And if you can show you have an opportunity to take a lead in this area. And I mentioned our science-based targets. We're also sitting in the Panda Pavilion here, and we have a project with WWF where we've working through forest protection and restoration projects, have committed to capture or reduce and remove the equivalent of our entire historical emissions from Scope 1 and 2, and do that over 20 years. We will donate the carbon credits from those projects to the NDCs of the country, to the climate commitments of Uganda, Madagascar, Vietnam. They will not be offsets on our account. And this is hard to understand, even for people in the business. You actually come up against more criticism than praise, often, for doing this, because you say, you're just offsetting, you're greenwashing, you're not tackling your own impacts. So it's actually, I mean, the reason, and this is big investments, it takes, commitment, internal resources. So they need to understand really why are we taking this high integrity approach, which isn't the quick fix. It's hard to explain, it's complicated. They needed to understand that before being able to take the decision. But then I think if you say this is actually, by doing this, you can show others and you can take a lead, I think that can be extremely powerful for people.
Can I just add one thing? I think if people here now are sitting and thinking they should do this and how to talk to their executive teams, one thing I think that has been absolutely key for us in IKEA is also that we have, it's leadership, we have now put our sustainability, heads of sustainability managers are sitting in the management teams. To me, that is one really crucial thing. You have to be in the room when the decisions are taken, and you add the sustainability perspective to it. And actually also what's happening then is the upscaling of that particular management team. So after some time, you're not the only one who needs to bring it up. Actually, everybody will. So I think to really also have that voice around the table when proposals, decisions, in steering groups, whatever, when that's been decided, you need to be there. I think at least it's been very helpful for us.
You want me to jump in?
Helen, please do.
So my name is Helen Walter-Terrinoni, and I have the pleasure of working on climate policy at Trane Technologies. So Trane Technologies is the largest heating and cooling provider in the world. We also move more than 60% of the frozen and fresh food that's moved around the world is moved in a Thermo King unit. We also manufacture equipment down to the very cold temperatures of vaccine, including for pharmaceutical processing, and also at higher temperatures to kind of help with industrial processing. So we have a pretty broad array of temperatures that we work in. We have a pretty big opportunity from a footprint perspective, and we're the first company that, I mean, you've probably already talked about SBTI. We're the first company in the space with SBTI all the way through to net zero, and certainly our progress is verified by CDP, the Carbon Disclosure Project. And I'm sure, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation up here if we weren't. I think that, from your question, I think that, one of the key things as a first mover and doer has been to have a visionary leadership. But luckily, first movers and doers are already off the starting blocks. So you don't have to be a visionary to do this. Like we've kind of paved the way a little bit, right? With very green pave. So some of the things that I think about and that I see in our company, we talk about sustainability from beginning to end. In every meeting, there's a discussion around sustainability. There's a discussion around how decisions by everyone will impact sustainability. We have an education program about sustainability and our targets that everybody has to take. You have to pass that. But also, and these are the kinds of things that great leaders do as change agents inside of companies, right? When you make a big decision, we're going to be safer, we're going to do whatever. They do this kind of thing. The other thing that we've done is that our executives are paid, and part of their compensation is based on, we have a gigaton challenge to reduce 1 billion tons of emissions from our customers' equipment, from our customers by 2030. And we monitor progress, and their compensation is based on that progress. And at first, it was kind of like, how did the overall company do? But now we've kind of split that out for the businesses, for them to be much more in the weeds on the details of what impacts that for themselves. And so, like, I think that those are the kinds of things that we've done to have laser-like focus on sustainability. like I said, it's everywhere. It is entrenched, embedded everywhere in our company.
I was just going to ask a follow-up on that and then pass. It sounds really lovely to say you brought this in to like look at their performance based on their environmental credentials. I don't know many CEOs who'll welcome additional scrutiny on themselves, so I'm just curious about how did you bring this?
It's been delightful. No, I think, with any people, everybody that goes through a change goes through a process, right? At first you're like, wait, what now? And then you kind of move through the steps of change, right? We had to work on credibility internally. I think you had mentioned that as well. We have to work on internal credibility. So we have to be able to show the detailed books to our business people. We can't just kind of have that off in a closet someplace for them to believe that we're on the right page around what we're asking them to do, right? So, the folks that put that together have been challenged. We actually kind of have moved, we are growing in this as well. And, like I said, one of the ways that we're growing is that this is kind of moving off to like more traditional accounting folks. We're teaching them how to do math on CO2. How fun for them. But like that's important to kind of move to that more traditional practice and process. And I think that that also helps business leaders kind of that are familiar with that to kind of understand what they're being asked to do. So we've had some very weighty conversations internally, like, yeah, I'm not sure you know how to do that math right. But once we kind of dig through, I'm sure there'll be something that's not quite right that has to get fixed, or something that somebody didn't know that has to be done differently. But this is where we are, and we're going to keep driving this forward.
Amazing, thank you. Jamie, you look like you wanted to jump in.
No, I think is a key point on the incentives, and I was just reflecting on, your target of kind of what you can do for your customers, and it's an enormous sum of CO2. You just mentioned there, 1 billion tons. But that can be tricky to measure, right? And there's a lot, it can be uncertainty in it. So I was just going to make the point that if you're not ready to go after the big impact, perhaps your scope 3 or avoided emissions, just start with your scope 1 and 2. Just get something into the executive incentive program that is not a financial metric. Start with scope 1 and 2. You can measure it, you can control it. The finance guys can more or less count it, and at least put it in their spreadsheets and report upwards. So then that just opens the door, and I think that is actually critical, getting it into the incentive schemes of the executive team.
That's a really important point. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
I just couldn't agree more. Start with where you are. Don't make stuff up. Like, don't do that. Like, make sure that you have a good understanding, a clear understanding. This can all be done in a teeny bit of baby steps, not too baby because we got to go. But to your point, like start with scope 1 and scope 2 because you can understand your supply chains.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful to point out. I guess we're touching on the good point here of focusing on 1 and 2 because 3 is very difficult to approach. How do we move towards real net zero if the economy is not decarbonizing, if your scope 3 isn't moving towards that? And how's your company looking at these kinds of things? So I'll come back to Christina.
Well, I think we want to look into all the scopes. So we look at 1, 2, 3, and we can. So I think if that was the question, if we're going to do that or not, I didn't understand.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
How are you working towards, if scope 3 progress is slow, how are you approaching this problem?
We have done a value chain mapping, of course. Where do we have our entire impacts? And of course, material and food ingredients is over 50%. And then we have production, we have transport, we have products used at home, we have customers coming to and back from a store if they choose to go to a store, and also the last mile fulfillment, and then we have end of life. So we map them all. And that I think also what companies need to do, you need to map, so you know, and then you start somewhere. And I can agree with you, Jamie, start where you can do something, because the organization also needs some good examples. They need some inspiration, some pride that you can actually do something. It's not like, this is doom and gloom, I can do nothing. We can do something. So I think it's also starting with imagining what you want to do. I think imagination is important. And you imagine a future where you're still there. And if you want to do that, you need to do something. That sounded a bit scary, I heard, but that wasn't my meaning. But still, you know, and then take yourself to that through that visionary leadership. But you need to lead with facts. So what we have done, of course, we need to map so we know and we have the clear facts on the table. And this is now what we need to do. And how far does the plans that we have, how far do they take us? So like now when we strengthened our goals and recommitted to them, we really spend time in the material agenda, since that is the biggest challenge for us. 52.2% of our climate footprint is material, foods 1 or 2%. So we need to get that down. That's a huge undertaking. And to be able to say yes to that, then the full company need to kind of commit, yes, we know and we want to do this. So doing that, and that of course means material extraction, the energy use when you make a raw material to a material. So we need to be in all those parts. So I think that do it like that. You know, it depends, of course, what company you are. You are a big company, so you have many people who can work on things. But it's not one person who will do everything. You need to also distribute the work along the value chain. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. Jamie, can I pass the same question to you?
Yeah, I think it is. There's nothing like action, the first result to show, to create belief that it's possible. So I think you know, the first 10,000 ton reduction you can make, and then you can celebrate that, and then you can build on that. So I think that's critical. So it's understand the levers. You know, you say, okay, map it out. For us, it's 56% is in the materials. And we've said actually we can do a lot with the existing product by moving to lower carbon materials without changing fundamentally the product design. And then we need to change the product design to meet our targets. But we start with the procurement team. We put the ownership there. We say, go out there, create the partnerships, source those materials, look at the development path to 2030, so we can put that into our plans, work with suppliers that are willing to go on this journey with us, focus there, start to see results. And then when we do these bigger platform changes in our products, then we can really look at the radical redesign. But we start with what we can do today. I think that's critical.
Amazing. And Helen?
For us, so it's really fun to be on this panel because we're in very different positions on this. So for us, 93.7% of our emissions is from the use of our products at our customers, right? It's energy. It's all about energy. And we need renewable energy to win the day at the end, right? And energy efficiency is enormous, but it's not going to get us there, right? So, I actually work with someone who works on electrification and energy efficiency. You know, I'm working on things like encouraging renewable energy, permit reform, those kinds of questions, those deep, weighty questions, because we can't get there if everybody doesn't do their part. Maybe I could also, you know, I'm just going to dive into it since you didn't take that away, the mic yet. You know, renewable energy also needs to be coupled with load reduction. So if I think about, you know, if we look around the expo center here, we've got, you know, kind of these billowy, you know, cover that gives us shade. We've got some reflective roofs, right? Those sorts of things. We need to kind of replicate those. Passive cooling in cities, these heat islands. It's also an equity issue, right? There's a lot of folks with low and medium income in cities that will benefit from passive cooling. These technologies are well known. I'm not going to make any money on that, but we need to do that as a world, right? To reduce the energy need out there. The other thing that we need to think about is demand shifting away from peak times a day, so that that energy use is happening in a way that those, I won't say the words I'm thinking, even though they're nice words. When peaker plants start up and shut down, they're the most emissive that they are. And so not having to use peaker plants is a really strong outcome to load shifting demand. So heating up hot water early in the day before folks come home from work. Shifting load to when more renewable energy is available. Like all of those things are things that we're working on from a policy perspective, because you know that has to happen for us to be successful. And then I'm gonna, maybe I need to quit, but maybe just one more thing. Like there are things that we can't count in our scope 3, and we don't care, but we're gonna do them because they're the right thing. food loss and waste, right? We're going to help with that. Looking at finance mechanisms for low and medium income families. Heard something from a fellow from Ghana 2 days ago that they have set up a loan program such that capital investment for families for energy efficient equipment can be spread across, and they can benefit putting more money in their pockets. So we're gonna do the right things, whether we get bonus points for them or not, and we're also going to do things to try to encourage what we need to kind of reach our goals.
That's amazing. And this is the easiest panel I'll probably ever chair. It's three very hopeful and passionate people, so all I have to do is point a microphone at you. But I guess we're going to ask we'll open it up to the audience if they have any questions, but I just wanted to ask as well, what advice do you have for companies who are at that early phase? What's the stuff, like we've been talking, there's been a lot of amazing advice already, but just if there are companies struggling to unlock action internally, do you have something that advice you could give? I'll start with Christina.
Stop thinking and start acting. No, but think big, start small, act now. And then you need to learn bloody fast. And actually work with others, because you cannot do this alone. And nobody is expecting you to do it alone. Work with peer companies, also within your industry, outside your industry, NGOs, governments, whatever that you need to get going, to get inspired, to get the help, and to also be stronger in your voice so you can also advocate for changes that are needed. So I think that is something that we are used, I think, to lead. This is just another area that we need to lead in. And you just need to go in there and start. I think that is what we have all been saying here now. So, yeah, I would just go for it.
I love the point you say about collaboration. I think collaboration might be the most used word.
And Seán, maybe I should also say, use the framework beyond net zero.
Oh, you did it. I didn't even have to jump in. Thank you so much. And we'll pass it down to Jamie.
I think you don't need to reinvent things, because we have the framework that you just mentioned there. So I think just take the advice. But I think if anyone's hesitating, I think that there has been many years of trying to sell this in and saying we really should do it. I think it's a good idea. Customers might care, but we're not sure. But I think it's the right thing to do for the planet. Now I think the risk of not doing something is so much larger than the risk of doing something. I think if anyone's sitting on their hands as a CEO or executive team, and then they're deciding not to take action, I think they're putting the longevity of their company at risk. And we're facing hard regulation, particularly in the EU on transparency, but it's driving due diligence regulation, needing to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. So if someone hasn't got the message yet, I think they should look at what is actually the risk of not taking action, if you need something to motivate you.
Absolutely. And Helen?
So I guess this is like the year of Barbie. There's like some Barbie movie out there. When a long time ago, I don't know, maybe a decade or more ago, there was a Barbie doll that you pulled the string on it, and it said, "Math is hard." And math is not hard. That Barbie was not correct. And I would say this: businesses do math all the time. You can do this. I love the start with what you know. Start with your own supply chain. You know how much you're buying of X, Y, Z. And I think that if you start small and go big, but make sure that you are doing your math, and that you are. Just comes to mind. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Right? Like, make sure you're doing your math. Make sure that you are validating that, and bring everybody in. Bring everybody in, because you never know what brilliant idea you're going to gain from someone. And also, when people are bought in, they're going to support you more.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And I guess, are there any questions from inside the room as well? Our audience, a very keen member up the front. Can we pass the mic?
Thank you. Working for WWF with corporate partners, I think what is important to me to have an understanding of or a feel for is how much of a race to the top does this SBTI commitment actually create. You're somebody else's scope 3. Do you have a sense of the requirement, the ask of you to actually deliver on somebody else's scope 3, is that increasing? Is there a drive that actually, quote unquote, pushes you? You're in the elite already, so, but do you sense this race to the top coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are winning projects based on being able to provide this information to our customers, big commercial buildings. And I think that we are seeing more and more in that. But I'll tell you the other side of the story, because there's like political stuff, right? Like the other side of the story is we actually save people money, right? You know, reducing energy consumption saves people money. So, you know, I think that there are, it's kind of like a win-win-win, right? So why not, right? So yes, we are being asked more and more, and I think that that's wonderful because I would say in our space, yeah, we're still inventing really wonderful things. We are a very innovative company. If somebody says you can't decarbonize it, we do it anyway and show people what's possible. But, you know, but 90 whatever % of what is needed to do this has already been invented and needs to be taken up. And so getting that uptake and having that demand signal is going to be what's needed to kind of advance and reach goals. So I think, you know, that we are seeing more of it, and we need to see more and more of it.
Would you guys like to answer? Yeah.
Yeah, I can comment. I think yes, definitely. I think we sell a lot to big building retailers of building materials, and they are increasingly using the environmental product declarations plus our kind of corporate score on EcoVadis, and then they're putting in database of products and they're rating it against other products, and they show that in their retail facilities. So they're showing it in their point of sale. So I think that in the reason they're doing that is they also want to decarbonize their footprint of the products they're selling. So I think definitely that's increasing a lot, and I think in the public procurement in public buildings we're seeing it a lot there in terms of specifying products with a lower carbon footprint. Then we're seeing this big move around embedded carbon in buildings now, and we're both working in Denmark, and then we've seen these thresholds on lifetime CO2 in buildings, and that would drive choices of how you design the building, what materials you use. So I think we'll see that pressure there. So I think it's coming from different sides, but it's definitely growing.
I mean, I was not maybe to answer this because we're kind of a closed system somehow. So we sell our stuff to IKEA franchisees. So we are all owning, the knowledge and the reporting of this together. But yes, they, of course, the franchisee need to also report on the scope 3, and then that becomes us who work in the supply chain and in the franchising part of it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. There's a question behind you if you pass the mic.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the panel. So you talk about risks of not taking action. You talk about win-win-wins. Why are all the companies not doing it? Why is it so difficult to convince some companies still?
I think they listen to Barbie too much. I think it does take some vision to do this, even though the trail has been blazed. And maybe you need to ask them. I heard on a panel this morning, I heard a company say, oh, it's so important to do this, and they're not doing it. And I'm like, what is happening here, right? And so I think that that we need to make sure it's not easy to behave that way, right? To kind of get away with acting like you're doing it and not doing it. And then I think also that, as more disclosure requirements come into play, you're always going to have first movers and doers on good ideas, right? And then policies are going to come into play that kind of shore everybody up to do the thing that needs to get done. So I think that may be it. I can't speak to all the reticents. I'm not sure what to say about that because they do math every day, right?
No, but I think this with the values and the culture that you have in a company can maybe help some to go faster. Even if you don't know how you will do it, you say, okay, we need to do something, and you start to find your way. Legislation will help, so people will have to go and do it. I think one part that is a little bit linked to, if I understood you right, Jamie, is that yes, we can talk about the impact that you have on the earth. If that didn't bite, then we can talk about the dependency you have on resources and stuff. If that is more harder facts, in my view, they are facts just as facts. But I have noticed, you know, talking to different people also, that sometimes feels like the sustainability maths is kind of undervalued, whilst, you know, if it's like raw material price increases, yeah, that is valued. And then, you know, that can be whatever that is caused from. And many times now we know it will be caused from climate and nature crisis. So I think that to talk about the impact and the dependency that a business has on resources, for instance, I mean, maybe that can get more people going then, because they have to count the bottom line. And this will be, yeah, we just need to, you don't need to be too, you know, educated to understand that, I think, nowadays.
Would you like to jump in on that? Or?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I ask myself the same question often, but I think now with the, you know, if you take, you know, we've been doing these TCFD disclosures, you know, where you look at the risks and opportunities from climate. If you operate in the EU or have significant, you know, operations in the EU, you need to put that in your annual report and accounts, and needs to be signed off by the board in the, you know, next year or the year after. So that completely changes it, where the level of, before you say, okay, we come up with a number, it has a 20%, you know, range of uncertainty in it, we're happy with that. Now it needs to be as part of your, you know, financially audited accounts, and it needs to be signed off by the board. So there's, and then you take the other standards in the reporting requirements on biodiversity, circular economy, they will come in more detail. So it's now, and it's moving into the finance domain, so there's going to be a much stronger integration of these topics into the main frame of decision making and risk analysis. So I think actually people grumble around the CSRD and other regulations, but I think it will be a bit of a game changer.
We can actually answer that as well from a WWF perspective, because we work with a lot of businesses who come to us at the beginning of their journey. And it's actually mostly around perception, is my understanding. Like, people have a perception that this is a very hard or very time-consuming, very expensive process for them, so it immediately becomes a barrier. So they know they have to do this eventually, so they're kind of waiting for the legislation to kick in before they actively engage. But that's what we're here to do. I see very much the Beyond Net Zero report, and this kind of work we do is, our role is myth-busting that. It's showing, and that's why we love to interview.
Seán, could I add one more thing? Another thing we did early on was we added our own internal price of carbon, and that helped us to spur action a little bit more. And maybe people won't need that because it's, you know, they're going to have to report anyway. But that was one of the things that certainly helped us to kind of get laser-like focus on what we needed to do.
Absolutely. No, that's a really incredible point to bring up. If there's any, we have one more question down the back.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dotun. I'm from Nigeria. One of the things I do in Nigeria is I have a 350-acre forest that we've been maintaining for about 40 years. We didn't start maintaining because of climate change. It was because of the high deforestation in Nigeria. We felt there's need to create at least a forest where people can see how trees looks like to the next generation. But now we've kept it for almost 40 years, and climate change is now the in thing, and we're talking about carbon credits and things like that. So the forest is now one of the biggest natural-based forests, private-owned in Nigeria. The question is there a way we not generate any form of income, whether carbon credits or anything, but just doing it for posterity, let me put it like that. But is there a way we can get incentive from such activities, maybe carbon credits or different carbon incentives around?
I mean, I guess, you know, I think the Energy Transition Accelerator, there was a discussion about that this week, the ETA. I mean, I don't know where that's headed. We have taken the position that right now we're not buying carbon credits. We do have customers that are interested in offsets, but there has been a lot of trickiness around how to make sure that they're credible. And so I think, like, we're still watching this very closely. And maybe we should hand this microphone to Tim and make him talk about it. I think that, you know, I do think that we need to think through, especially renewable energy and how that's going to be funded around the world. I can't win if there's not renewable energy. And so we do have to kind of think through this sort of thing. So I don't know if anybody else wants to say.
Yeah, just on as well, we talk about there are credible pathways that we look at. We know carbon credits have a place, and that's through initiatives like Gold Standard. But we as WWF will also hold that challenge to our companies. They can't use credits against their reduction strategies. It has to be a credible reduction, and then that is counted in a separate ledger in a different part of the company. So that's more about investing in the community and investing those kind of unlocks that we have. But yes, I see there's another question in the middle there.
Yeah, thanks. So obviously a lot of talk at this COP about fossil fuels, as there should be. It's taken, I think it took 26 COPs before we even talked about fossil fuels at all in coal in Glasgow, and now we're finally talking about all fossil fuels. And when we think about Scope 3, you know, Scope 3 is essentially, you know, a company's microcosm of the entire economy. And, you know, for you, you were saying Scope 3 is actually 95% is in the use phase, right? I'm curious if when you've looked at your hotspots in Scope 3, you know, what percentage is energy and thereby fossil fuels, and how do you see a pathway to getting to your Scope 3 goals if the rest of the economy continues to fail to decarbonize?
Yeah, when it comes to decarbonization, of course, that is not led by IKEA. We need to work with others, and I think that is the way to work together with others. But if we see what we try to do then with our suppliers, for instance, in the production, I mean, we can work with them for them to put, you know, on-site energy generation, and we have helped them by actually putting a fund for 100 million euro fund that they can take financing from to get, for instance, solar panels on the roofs. But that will only take them to maybe 15, 20, 25% of the total energy need that they have. So then we also work with electricity. So we started with a renewable electricity program. So we go on looking then hotspots in the world where do we have, you know, the biggest use of electricity, being then non-renewable, China, India, Poland. So we started there and helped them actually we go and bundle the volumes and go to create the PPAs and the IREX when PPA is not available. And by that we are shifting. And we can see that we have moved, for instance, in China, I think from 8% in 21 to 85% or something in 22. So I mean, in percentage. So we can also be part of that by pushing also bundling and being a voice in the total economy to get more renewable energy onto the market. Then I think for us, since material is such a big part and this material extraction and of course the processing of material, then we need a lot of material. And if you say, for instance, making glass, making melting metal, you know, of course we have the green steel now up in part of Sweden. That doesn't really tally with our footprint where we do metal products. Of course, we need to work on that. But also there, work with our suppliers to see, can we help them? And can we be a voice to advocating for instance, glass, that we have furnaces that doesn't use then a gas and so on, but we can go renewable. And the technology is there, still a bit expensive, but get to those points. So we try to involve ourselves wherever we see, you know, the hotspot that we are depending on. Wherever it is, we need to move it. Then we know that to get all the way to 2030, we think is difficult because these big industries is huge shifts, is paradigm shifts in equipment, and you do those investments when you know the current technology you have when it's phased out. And I mean, since it's business, they produce 24 hours, you know, 365 days a year. So it will be one day, and that's when you need to shift. So you need to be there exactly at the time. Therefore, you cannot start too late. You need to start now, so you know now we need to push a trigger. They're about to do a change, a big investment in 5 years. That's when it needs to be better than before. And we, by the way, we are now where we are in this COP, but we are totally saying IKEA, we do phase out of fossil fuel. We don't say phase down, we say phase out totally. And by 2025, all coal is gone, and 2030 all.
Amazing, thank you. We could keep talking all day. This has been an amazing panel and there's lots of engagement, but it is that time to wrap up. So I just want to say thank you again to our panel. Thank you so much, Christina, Jamie, and Helen. You've been amazing, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So, it's a pleasure.
I said failure is not an option.
Thank you so much. While you're around, let's get
Yes, okay.
Size of the mob, it was really big.
Oh, yeah. It's nice to see you. Yeah, I'm Helen.
And I'm nice.
I did not. I was at another thing. Did you go?